Cold out. And here we are live with the first Accademia Giallo of 2025.
Woohoo!
Wow, I didn't mean for that to rhyme. I love rhymes. I also love Valentine's Day, which just ended, and we're here talking about possibly one of the most romantic films we've ever discussed on this show, Hatchet for the Honeymoon by Mario Bava, 1970. This movie, how is this movie 55 years old, if I did the math correctly? I don't know, because man, this thing feels vital, and like you could show it today and people would still be amazed, even though they'd probably complain, there's so many cliches from other movies in here. Whereas, this one predates a lot of the stuff that we've talked about on this show, even including my beloved Friday the 13th. There, I got the reference in early. But anyway, we're going to talk all about it today. And with me are my wonderful faculty of Accademia Giallo. I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have John Kitley of Kitley's Crypt, and AC of Horror 101 with Dr. AC. And I have it on good authority that there may be someone who's a little tardy, who's going to be sliding into the classroom, sneaking into the back to take notes and doodle in his notebook. But we'll let him in if he shows, if indeed he shows.
Yes.
But
make sure he gets a detention.
I don't know what that would mean in the case of this show. He's got to like hang on after we all leave.
Well, I would say, I would say
clean up the blood.
Well, I was going to say he had to watch Fatal Frames, but he would enjoy that.
Yeah.
Well, plus, I think holding him after class, is that more a punishment for him or for the audience? But I'm bumped. Sorry.
Hey.
All right. So, Hatchet for the Honeymoon. I got to start off with the question that we ask a lot on this show, and I'm fully prepared for it to be yes or no. Either way, I think this movie is amazing. So, is this Giallo? Why are we talking about it?
No.
No?
I would not consider it a Giallo.
As I was, well, it's funny when we talked about discussing it, somebody suggested it, and I said, "Is that a Giallo?" And I went to the IMDb description and it talked about a series of murders, and I went, "Maybe it is." And then I was watching, and I'm like, "No, it's not." What it is, however, and I think this is interesting, and I think why it belongs on the syllabus is it is basically an inversion of a Giallo, in that we are with the killer the whole time instead of wondering who the killer is. And it's also an inversion of a ghost story, which is another fun thing. So it's like, I like the fact that I wouldn't introduce anyone to Gialli with this movie, but I think after you've watched a few, I think this is a fun one to kind of see what your brain does with it. And because it's Bava, of course it's worth watching. There's some great camera work. There's great colors. There's great, just visuals. The performances are fun. So yeah, I'm glad we watched it, but I would not say that this is a Giallo per se.
Well, let's start with what you called an inversion of the genre, because I think that's a great way for us to kind of justify talking about it. Because I had the same reaction after it was over. After I picked up my brain from off the floor, I said, "This was phenomenal. I can't wait to talk about this on Accademia Giallo." But you've got a great point. Okay, first of all, it doesn't take place in Italy. It takes place in Paris. The killer does not wear black gloves. He wears no gloves. As you mentioned, AC, we know who the killer is right off the bat. We do have a detective in the film who is pretty competent. So it's like, yeah, everything that can be done with this genre is kind of turned around, but this is also still pretty early days. This is 1970.
Right.
So a lot of things that we have come to talk about
Same
on the
year
show
as Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which is what we kind of mark as the big heyday of the Gialli.
Yeah. But, when I think about the other movies I was reminded of watching this film, and it's one of those situations where I can't tell if the people that I'm imagining ripped this movie off actually were even aware of it, and they just decided, well, 10 people have seen this movie. I can turn this into, well, hold on a second. I was going to say American Psycho, and speaking of, we have Brian Martinez.
Did I do okay for segues? I mean,
that was pretty good.
Yes, that was brilliant. But okay, so we talked about, Brian, that we're kind of looking at this in the frame of this is not a giallo film, but it is an inversion of a lot of giallo kind of tropes and things. And I was just getting ready to talk about how a number of movies that I feel like were influenced by this film. I don't know if that's in fact true or if it's just something that's out there in the cosmic consciousness that people picked up on. But, I can't help but think, we're with the killer. He's talking to us about what's going on in his brain. And he's very kind of, he's a dashingly handsome man. He's very, kind of particular about the finer things in life.
Super handsome.
Dude,
I was taken away by his looks,
Yes, I would risk getting married just so he would attack me.
Right.
But
a fetish of mine has always been to visit his little room full of mannequin brides,
Oh, we'll get to that. But no, I immediately thought of Patrick Bateman. Did Bret Easton Ellis watch this movie before he wrote American Psycho? I thought of course, Friday the 13th, specifically Part 2. And this is like Bava Inception because it opens with a murder on a train. The killer goes into this car and there's a couple making out and he goes up behind the two of them and kills them from behind, as he would do, a few years later in Bay of Blood. And of course, as Steve Miner and Sean Cunningham, who had no idea that Bay of Blood existed, would do in Friday the 13th Part 2. I'm gonna let it go. Okay. It's the year 2025, new year. I'm gonna get over this thing, whatever it is.
New Year's resolution.
Yes. And we all know how those work out.
Right.
But also talking about the room full of the mannequins, I thought of Maniac, which I watched for the first time a few months ago. So there's a ton going on here. So help me out, guys. Do you think this is completely coincidental? Do you maybe, being the film scholars that you are, have people talked about, oh yeah, this is Holy Hatchet for the Honeymoon?
I'm pointing to the film scholars.
Hanging 10? Oh, okay.
My brain's still broken from the fact that you just saw Maniac for the first time. I'm like, I want to talk about that, but we will save that for another day. So I would say that, as you mentioned, it is early on in the cycle. So if anything, I feel like Bava's borrowing from himself from Blood and Black Lace with the recurrence of the mannequins. And I think he's just kind of using a good hook, in terms of what would be a good theme for a murderer? Let's have him kill, brides to be. Although he kind of blows his own MO. Like he kills the one that's literally on the honeymoon, on the train. But then he just starts killing people who've announced they've gotten engaged. And I'm like, dude, what? You gotta wait.
No, AC, it's a simpler time. This is back when engagement was as good as having the ring on it.
I was like, oh, you gotta wait for them to get married at least. Come on. And you got to use a hatchet. He doesn't even use a hatchet.
Cleaver for the Honeymoon doesn't quite have the same.
I know it doesn't, but what?
Cleaver for the beaver.
Hey, whoa!
I'm just saying, hatchet for the honeymoon, cleaver for the beaver.
Yep.
That was a proposed sequel that never happened.
Yeah, it is it's the shiniest meat cleaver I think I've ever seen on film. Yeah. And that kind of leads
to jump in, with that sentiment, because I think that's a widely probably discussed topic when it comes to this movie in terms of is it giallo? Does it fit more in line with the Maniacs and American Psychos of the world? I think so, but again, this is 1968 when they first began production on this movie, so there's a lot more in line with what's going on in the atmosphere of just thrillers from Italy, thrillers from Spain, because this is actually a Spanish written film.
Right.
And then it was proposed to Bava, and Bava was like, yeah, I'll shoot this thing. And then he met the lady who plays Mildred, and he was quite taken away by her or whatever. So he basically retrofitted her into this movie just to work with her immediately. So there's I feel like there's certain things that happened in this movie that are just by coincidence in terms of how we look at it now, how it's laid out and all the things that have been done since. Like, I think it's weird to say, oh yeah, it was just, it was out there and it's just kind of coincidence. I'm sure people throughout their lives watching it, maybe reading things about this movie and coming to the fact where it's like the only mystery in this movie is why he's doing it, right? Like that's what we arrive to at the end, because it's kind of laid out. It's almost really like true POV, because he's like narrating the movie. He's telling you right off the bat what he is, and he doesn't even realize what he is. So I think a lot of what happens in this movie, although it does play like in the Giallo bathtub or whatever, or sandbox, whatever you want to say. I'm sorry.
No, Giallo
I like your metaphor. Your metaphor.
Wedding party. Wedding party.
Wedding. Yeah, it's in the Giallo wedding party, right? But it's doing its own thing. So I think Bava does that a lot, like in his movies. Like he just kind of wanders into this brand new subgenre that he like helped to create. But I don't think he's working on that level in terms of, oh, I'm gonna create a POV slasher right here. You know what I mean? Like I think it just happens, and it's funny watching this again for the show, how like it really hits you in the face how similar it is to a lot more modern type slashers, So
first of all, Brian, I just want to announce right here, we're ditching Accademia Giallo. Next month, we're going to be back with Giallo Bathtub. We're going to be nude from the top up, and we're going to have rubber duckies and scrub brushes and little.
I will only be a part of that concept if we're all in the same bathtub. That's the only way I'll be a part of that.
I'll do something with green screen or AI. I don't know. But anyway, no, the other thing that we meet another character, or the kind of the foil, who's Helen Wood, played by the lovely Dagmar Lysander. She shows up as she wants to become an employee at John, the lovely and handsome John. He's the head of this like bridal agency / modeling agency. They do everything in terms of weddings. She gets a new job because the last girl who worked there mysteriously quit or disappeared. It turns out she is the sister. Is she supposed to be the sister, or she claims to be the sister of the girl who left and disappeared, or is it one of the other people that he has buried in his greenhouse? I couldn't quite get that straight. Remember this?
She's the sister.
Yeah.
She is, okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, who is she the sister of? She's the sister of one of the victims, but is it the last girl who left?
I think she's the one from the train.
Yeah.
Oh, from the train.
It's discussed, isn't it? Like, isn't there a line or two?
She mentions her sister is Rosie, I think, but I couldn't remember who Rosie is supposed to be. Yeah. I mean, but either way, again, hey, look, we've got Friday the 13th, the final chapter, the relative of the victim coming back to try and exact revenge by seeking justice. Totally coincidental. It's in there.
We should rename this show. How is this movie similar to the Friday the 13th franchise?
Yeah. Friday the 13th is the center, and these are all the spokes.
Yeah,
the Kevin Bacon of Giallo.
Yeah.
And he was in a Friday the 13th, so it all works.
Yeah, there you go.
But no, okay. What I love, Brian, is you mentioned, we don't really know why this killer is doing these things. Mm-hmm. He kind of knows why, because he's at least strong enough or smart enough to figure out that every time he kills, he has a bit of a puzzle piece from a traumatic childhood experience gets put into place.
Yep.
Because he witnessed the horrible death of his mother, and he keeps getting these flashes, but every time he draws blood, the camera literally comes a bit more into focus, and we see a bit more of that scene. And surprise, surprise, it's a Norman Bates situation, but it's not quite what I love. And we've got the spoiler tag on, folks, so just keep this in mind. At the end, we find out it's not that mom was cheating or anything like that. It's just that whatever happened with his OG dad, he didn't want mom to get remarried again, and something snapped in him, and he took both of them out, which I thought was, this movie is very sad. I mean,
oh yeah,
it's not even that graphic per se compared to even some of the other Bava we've talked about, but it's our main character, even though he's a monster, you get the feeling that this break really messed him up. in a way that I don't think there's a level of, I guess, humanity to him that even Patrick Bateman doesn't have. And so the end, when we see that he's haunted by the apparition of his dead wife, they're like, yeah, that sucks and he deserves it, but man, what a hellish vision that is.
Yeah, especially now that he's confined and now he's got to sort of live the rest of whatever his life is with this,
with his wife blowing her own ashes out of a satchel at him forever. Wow. So demented.
And we talked early on, like, I think also it's in a version of a ghost story, which is not something I've seen before, where everybody else can see the ghost, but you can't. The murderer can't see the ghost. I was like, I don't think I've ever seen that anywhere before. And I love the fact that they're like, and for you, madam, and he's like, why are you talking to the empty chair?
Are we bringing your company home too?
I would almost think that what we're seeing is through his eyes. So, because the more I thought about this afterwards, because the whole ghost thing doesn't fit with the psychosis element of the film, it's making me think that all of what he is seeing is up here, that these people are not talking to the ghost.
He's just imagining.
He's thinking that and because it makes more sense if you're looking at it at a clinical standpoint, that this guy is obviously crazy. And I think the reason that some consider this a giallo mainly because it's Bava. But if you look at Bava's filmography, other than like The Girl Who Knew Too Much in Blood and Black Lace, he would always weave in and out of. He didn't go, I'm making another thriller, I'm going to make another one. So this is his variation where we know who the killer is right from the get-go, because he's our main character. There is a question of who did the killing of Mom. I think it's kind of obvious that it's him. But then we also have a very intelligent cop that knows right from the get-go this guy's guilty. He just can't prove it, which is completely opposite of your typical giallo.
Well, and I love that point that you made, John. I'm sorry, but it's because, like, when you say that Mario Bava wasn't necessarily looking to make his next giallo or whatever, because everybody around was looking to make the next giallo or the next like Italian thriller that mimics all these movies that are coming out at the time. And meanwhile, Bava is just doing his own thing throughout the entire process of his film career. Like, I feel like whenever he's making a movie, yes, like there are remnants from his previous films or whatever, but he's always trying to throw in some new element into like whatever he creates going forward. And just like this one, it's got a lot of those giallo elements, but it's got a lot of, like, I don't know, next level things that won't ever be touched again until, like, American Psycho, like all these decades later, or, even something like Maniac, where people look at as such a brutal, like, slasher of a movie or whatever, but it definitely has roots in this movie. When you consider the landscape of horror filmmaking in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yeah, and there's definitely also some Psycho in here, which came out 10 years earlier. Down to there's a truly shocking visual, I think, where there's one of the brides to be that he invites to his house and says, hey, pick out any dress you want from this kind of hidden gallery he has that he dances around. She picks out the dress and he goes to dance with her with the cleaver. And when he attacks her, I think this is the right woman, but he shows up and he's in a wedding veil and lipstick. It's a real Norman Bates kind of moment. And it's so unlike anything that we see before that with this character or even after that, because that motif doesn't show up again. And it's just, it's a very bizarre moment, but it doesn't, just because it's kind of silly looking, doesn't make it any less chilling, because you're like, wow, this guy has really gone around the bend and this girl is in trouble.
I almost feel like the addition of, who's the lady that plays Mildred? Laura Betty?
Yeah.
I feel like it was the inclusion of her that changed up the elements, because until then, I think it was looked at as this gentleman that owns this like bridal gown store or whatever, like fashion house, and he sells to these people, and these people end up being his victim. Like I think that was solely the story beforehand, and then Bava met this Laura Betty or whatever, and like legend has it. Like I just read this stuff on the internet, so who knows if this is real. Like
then
we
it's
don't have
definitely true.
Mario. Yeah, we don't have Mario around to like back up like the info or whatever. But like the stuff that I read points to him really being taken aback by this Laura Betty, and then like philosophically, I'm not saying that oh my god, like she's hot or whatever because her teeth are horrible, but I'm just saying, like, that was the only thing I stared at the entire time whenever she was on screen. But like I'm just saying, like, she fits that character of that nagging wife that he wants to divorce so perfectly. I think part of what I read, she was supposed to like lose weight for this role, and then she did, and it was like, here I am ready to shoot, and they put her in this movie, and they wrote her in a lot of these particular scenes strictly for screen time. So all that stuff with her haunting John, that's I would almost imagine, oh, let's just write her in this to give her more screen time or whatever. So the haunting, while effective as it is, I think it speaks more to that, which, like, again, it's like
finding more opportunities to keep her in.
Yeah, right. So it's like, I think that stuff plays so well psychologically, but it takes away from it being a giallo. Whereas I think if you don't put her in this movie and he's just this guy that you have to figure out who's doing the murders, right? Like, I think it fits a little bit better in terms of it being a giallo with his childhood trauma, him owning this fashion house thing. Like I think those elements fit more aligned to what giallo is. Now you include Mildred into the movie, and that's like an integral piece of the entire story. It changes the whole dynamic,
Yeah, I mean, because
keep in mind she was also one of the uncredited screenwriters.
Really?
There you go.
Wow.
She worked on Bay of Blood as well.
I rest. Oh,
and by extension, Friday the 13th Part 2. But no, the thing
what was it about letting go?
It's February. All the resolutions are gone. But no, I think the thing about her character is you can definitely see, or you can imagine, there's kind of a cutoff point where he just snaps and kills his wife, and then tries to hide the body. All that other stuff with the haunting, you could take that out, and you're right, it would just be kind of a standard, Italian thriller. But adding that extra element, it's not just that she's a ghost, but to your point, AC, it's a ghost twist that we haven't seen before, where he can't see her, other people can. And there's a twist on that twist where when he finally gets caught, and he gets caught by the police, and then there's a cut to, it almost looks like the next morning, because he's coming down the stairs, followed by the detective. No handcuffs. They're just kind of like, "Hey, everybody! Looks like
the most polite arrest I've ever seen."
Exactly. Everybody, they're very, it's consensual.
Yeah,
it's George Bailey at the end of It's a Wonderful Life. Hey, did you hear that, everybody? I'm going to jail. And
never mind. Never mind that, like, his potential victim is standing right there, and there's literally no security involved or whatever.
Right, and it's just like, hey, what's going on with you? Maybe things could have worked out, and she's like, "Are you kidding me?"
Right.
But he gets taken away into that wagon, and the twist on the twist is first of all, to your point, John. I don't know what point the movie stops being real, if it ever was real from a kind of an omniscient point of view. But there's definitely a bit where it stops being true for us, and we're just inside of John's head. John, I'm talking to you about John. Now I'm incepting this whole podcast. But
when are you guys really on?
What?
On something.
I didn't even press go live. No.
Did I wake up this morning? Is this a dream?
Maybe. But no, he's in the paddy wagon, and one of the cops runs up at the very last minute before the door closes with the satchel and places it in the truck. And then he's like, oh, I should put this in the seat next to you. And that's when John notices, like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? That satchel was just in the house. There's no reason any of the cops should have thought, oh, this is important. We should bring this to the station, especially if they would have looked inside and seen maybe some ashes. I don't know, because he scattered ostensibly all of them,
and not to mention evidence tampering. Like, what are you guys doing?
Maybe they are closer to regular Giallo cops, but anyhow,
they don't even put handcuffs on. You want them to collect evidence and dust for fingerprints? I mean, come on.
I do love the fact that it's a paddy wagon, by the way. Like, it's just so
with the kind of the cool triple doors opening up. That's kind of neat.
They do it different in Paris.
Yeah,
but the twist on the twist, of course, is that now that he's going away forever and he's been caught, she can finally see him and no one else can. So she's going to haunt him forever. It's chilling stuff. When she shows up, she's in this black shroud with diamonds, kind of like, I don't know if it's supposed to be reminiscent of wedding rings or something, but there is just like this nighttime sky quality to her. She's very pale. She's very kind of happy to be there, happy to be taunting him. And it's eerie, especially we see there's one shot or a couple of shots out in the daytime, that kind of fancy breakfast nook or whatever. And she shows up when she wasn't there before. It's chilling stuff. So I'm not necessarily always a fan of movies that mix up genres, because sometimes it takes a lot of deft care to do that. So you've got kind of a slasher, inside the mind of a killer, and now it's also a ghost story. In here, it really works. But let me ask, I usually do this at the beginning of the show, but I want to go real quick around the table. I mean, real quick. First impressions, you guys, when you saw this movie, where did you see it in your kind of Giallo education? And did you like it? Did you appreciate it the first time you saw it? AC, let's start with you.
Honestly, I have no memory of having seen it before, other than to question whether it was a Giallo or not. Because I remember it being kind of a ghost story. I think I was watching it more in terms of watching Bava's work. And so it was less about tracking down the Gialli and more about, just kind of covering everything he had done. And I mean, that was my initial, and I'd only seen it once before and it had been a while. So I was glad to come back around to it.
Cool. What,
John?
Remember
if I think this got a legit release over here on VHS, but I could be wrong. But I was doing the same thing. You got to knock off all the Bava, because you're watching Blood and Black Lace and Planet of the Vampires and all these other ones. This one was always like, it's okay. Yeah. But it's I don't hold it in the same regards as his other ones that are over the top in style and color and atmosphere. And that's not a criticism. It's just, I really hold those in high regard. This one is good and it's different. And I have a lot of respect because he's trying to do something different, but it wouldn't be on my top 10 of his list of his films.
I think that speaks
not
to
the
richness.
10.
I think that speaks to the richness of Bava's filmography, though.
Yes.
In fact, that there are 10 films that are better than this one.
I got to watch those 10, and we probably talked about a couple of them, because I've probably let the cat out of the bag. I was really floored by this movie. Yeah. Possibly it might not be fair, because I'm considering it in the context of other movies that I've seen, and kind of thinking that even though they borrowed elements from this, I still think in some ways this movie does those better. But Brian, tell me about your experience with this.
I saw this after I saw like the Giallo staples, like in the mid 2000s. Like just kind of going back and then just, this is a genre and blah, blah, blah. And then you start looking at all these movies. And this one was, of course, Mario Bava. I saw this around the time when I first watched Kill Baby Kill, because I was like kind of catching up with all the Mario Bava stuff, right? And then I noticed back then, because I'm kind of a Demons fan, I noticed that Lamberto Bava was like credited as assistant director of this movie. So I was like, oh shit, like let me see what else he's like, credited as assistant director, because for me it's like that's history. It's like it's one of my favorite movies of all time. and then it also speaks to like the Bava lineage too, you know. So when I watched it, I had like, this was still like when I was formulating, you know, like I'm not going to sit here and be like I'm the authority of all Giallo or whatever, but it was when I was formulating in my head what I perceive as Giallo, you know.
Yeah.
So I saw it in the mid 2000s. Instantly when I watched it, I was like, this is like American Psycho, you know, like, this is more in line with that stuff, you know. But I put it down, and then I will say, like on subsequent viewings, I've learned to really appreciate this film more. So every single time I watch it, so even this last time, I was just more like connected to the fact that there was a lot of turmoil making this movie. So like I said previously, like it was started in 1968 and then later released in 1970. So that tells you that there was a lot of stuff that was going on in between. I think they actually put the movie down and then didn't begin shooting again until a year later. So trying to watch to see if there's like any inconsistencies that exist, there's pretty much nothing, you know, like it almost really feels like a seamless movie when you watch it. So that's credit to, I would say, Bava's filmmaking and his storytelling. When you watch it, there's no indication that this movie was like in turmoil when it was making it. It's just such a beautifully, cohesively shot film. For me anyway. Like I don't know if you guys see any inconsistencies, but I've always loved the movie. I just don't necessarily truly consider it like trust me, there's some stuff in this movie that has my Giallo thingy sticking way up. Especially those like the murder suit that he rocks with the little chain belt. Like I love that shit. So it's like whenever he presents his little mirror finish hatchet or whatever, and it's almost like it's super Giallo. Like it's steeped in Giallo, but it's got all these elements that point it into other directions, you know. So yeah, that's when I watched it.
What you're referencing there is kind of the iconography. Like it's like he makes the physical piece more important than just a prop.
Yes.
It's something that he's kind of highlighting its presence. And I think that's something that we see throughout a lot of Giallo. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Like I remember when, and I don't mean to say this like I'm throwing my own 2 cents out there or whatever, but like I am.
I mean, it's your 2 cents.
I remember I was invited to help a fellow filmmaker of mine, a friend, shoot a short film of his. And in the film, he had a sequence where an individual with leather gloves was going to grab like a bottle of J&B. So he had me direct that part of his film because he was like, Brian, like you understand that the gloves are a separate character.
Yeah.
So I want you to really direct it the way that you would direct, like, you know, a Giallo film or whatever. So I was like, that's interesting that he put it in that way, because it's in truth, like whenever you see a good Giallo film with like things that inspire other filmmakers, it's like the Dario Argento putting the gloves onto his own hands because he's the only one that understands the musicality of that scene. You know what I mean? So I think Bava is also of that ilk, where he does understand just the music in the murder of this, like, you know, the unfortunate part of filmmaking is murder, right? And he just knows how to shoot a film or shoot a scene, a sequence in regards to that. So
yeah. And such a visual artist.
Yeah, and I don't think he's just doing it because he loves filmmaking. Like if you see, he also has a credit to you know, he lends this movie as well.
He's a cinematographer,
yeah. So like I think he understands, like whenever he's got a vision of a movie, he understands how to put it on film. So
well, there's a couple of, you know, talking about that, there were a couple of moments that were really striking to me visually. And again, you know, the theme of this episode is kind of surprise, I think, at least for me. The girl that I referenced earlier, where he attacked, like after she was dancing around the room with him, she takes a cleaver, the cleaver to the face. But the way that's represented is he takes the cleaver and he throws, or he doesn't throw, but he kind of lashes out. And the split in her face, there's a still, like a red photograph of her. And the cleaver goes through that at the last second. It's the most bizarre thing. I think there might be I just watched it this morning, so I'm not as well versed, and I'll definitely keep an eye on it for the next time I watch it. But I feel like there's a shot of her a shot of kind of a mannequin version of her, and then at the moment of impact, it goes into a photograph of her, which goes back to the idea of that she's a model and she's, he's photographed her a number of times. And it's also that kind of separation, that dehumanization of him from his victims, which also goes back to, the trauma with the mom and all that stuff. But it was such a surprising moment, because you expect, especially because you've seen, later films with the gore and the kind of the element of blood everywhere. This movie is very, very tame, but no less impactful and shocking, because I fell back like when I saw that, because I wasn't expecting that kind of switcheroo at the moment of impact. But also there's a scene where John is looking at a sink filling with water, and he imagines it all of a sudden becoming blood. But it's not like they do the thing where they run, fake blood through the tap. They do it all through gels. Like the water just, like, you close in on the sink full of water, and all of a sudden it becomes bright red. And it's like, oh, that's all done through lighting. There's so many of those flourishes throughout this movie that, yeah, it's not a giallo. It's not even really a slasher. It's a psychological thriller, but it's above all, it's an art film, and in the best way, not the I'm going to be bored to tears kind of way.
And speaking to that, because I didn't want to lose the moment, because that speaks to the turmoil on set. Like, they ran out of money, so a lot of the kill scenes were just sort of shot that way, and then they were kind of like fixing it up or whatever. But what you just referenced, that particular, I think you're referencing Femi Bunusi.
Sure.
Her she plays Alice, right? She's the one that he's dancing with. And
okay.
Which, by the way, she's when she later turned up in Strip Nude for Your Killer, I was like, she's just, I love her beauty in this movie. But again, they ran out of budget, so a lot of that stuff, like, he shot creatively, right? So that particular slash scene where, like, you see the photo and all that, for me, for my money, like, that is pure giallo. Like, that, if you can distill the definition of what giallo is, just that one little cut, that one little scene where he, like, hacks her and you see the photo and blah blah blah, right? Like, the artistry of that, to me, is giallo. Like, that's perfect, like, picture. Like, you can pause it and then hang it up in a art house somewhere, right? But to me, and it's hard for me, like, to define what true giallo is, but that's what it is. And it's funny that it's not even in a true giallo movie. It's just one of the bits that's in it that bleeds giallo, so
see, that's why we're talking about it. We found a reason. AC, go ahead.
So one of the other things I noticed more on this movie than others, and maybe this speaks to the budgetary constraints, is there's a lot more zooming and panning than what I'm used to seeing from Bava. Usually he sets up his shots a little more artfully so that you don't notice the camera movement, or when you do, it's done kind of a bravura way. Right. This felt very kind of workmanlike in terms of, we're going to zoom in here, we're going to pan over here. So that was just something that struck me. I did remember reaching out to John and saying, why are they even married? Like, John and Mildred have the unhappiest marriage. Why? I don't like, I won't grant you a divorce. I'm like, I would rather live 50 more years in misery than give you a divorce. I'm like, wow, that's stick to it at this.
Well, they talk about it, and again, it was 4:30.
And it's her money too. That's the other thing.
But it was his. It was kind of like her money, but his inherited business or something like that. So there was failing,
right?
But I don't know if she
was pumping money into it.
Right, but there was some kind of a marriage of convenience there that like the two of them working together made it work, even though they hate each other. I still don't quite understand the logic of it.
Again, that's a character that was sandwiched into the movie after it was all written and everything. So it does speak to that. Like, for me, for my money, for my taste, it definitely adds a super interesting byproduct of putting this actress into this movie, this character into this movie that didn't exist before when you were starting to shoot it and all that stuff. Like, it does add that, for me anyway, it adds that element of, like, Edgar Allan Poe-ish, like, the uncanny, the telltale heart or whatever. Like, you see this beyond life. Like it still haunts you. The whatever it is, the sickness that you're battling in your mind, and the mentality of it. You see this apparition that like to John and what everybody has spoken already. Like everybody else sees it other than you, but you see the entire thing. It's such a weird quasi-mental thing to look at.
Well, first I want to correct the record because I was looking at my notes. The kill with the wedding veil and lipstick, that was actually when he kills Mildred. That's not Alice.
I didn't want to correct you, but
well, no, please feel free to do so. I'm here to learn as everybody else. I don't want to skate by. I don't want to get my diploma and not know how to read, so to speak. But no, that brings up a great moment when he finally decides to off his wife, and it's a horrible death, and she dies on the stairs just at the moment the police inspector shows up with Alice's fiance for some questioning at the house. And we've got the body. It's great because she does her death twitch like on the stairs while they're having the conversation, and then the blood starts to drip down. And we've seen this in 1,000 horror movies ever since. There's the body that's dripping blood and people having a conversation like, who's going to turn around and notice? But right. But what I think is great is the talking about, we heard screams coming from in here. And he's like, yeah, we were watching a horror movie, or I was watching a horror movie upstairs. And that's a great little kind of button on it. But then there's a button on the button where later, not only does our detective Russell go back and watch the movie and put the timing together to say that scream didn't even happen at the time.
Yep.
Right. But also the whole idea of he's constantly sweating, even though it's it's very cool outside. It's like you should probably go see a doctor for that condition you have, sir. But I just there was that great like, are they going to find out? Is he going to get caught? And where would the movie go from there if he did? But he doesn't. And from that moment, her ghost kind of comes back gradually, and then all at once, as the saying goes, he can't quite get rid of the body because it won't burn in the furnace. So he ends up having the ashes, carrying those around. But then he figures, hey, maybe the ghost has something to do with this satchel of ashes. I'll get rid of that. But it keeps coming back. To your point, Brian, it is very, very Poe. I want to pull over real quick, look at some comments, because we've been ignoring our lovely comments the whole show. Jonas is back.
I have it. I have the 88 films version somewhere. It's a great version.
I thought you were going to say you have Jonas's comment somewhere. We've got it right here on the screen. Jonas says 88 Films has a great version of the movie. Got to check that out. Is there a nice Blu-ray of this? Is that the 88 Films
the 88 Films version of it? I don't know. I'm not sure if it's Region B or All Region.
Well, it's the 55th anniversary, so there's probably going to be a special edition. Fingers crossed. Big Swifty, 500. Nice. Hey, gents. This one always seems to get overlooked when discussing Bava films for some reason. I love this one. Me too. Only complaint is Dagmar isn't in it enough. All right.
Much to her dismay, by the way. Like she was part of that whole thing of like, oh, you're inserting this this Laura Betty in here. How about me or whatever? Like she was really disgruntled like during the shooting of this movie. So yes, like she also agrees that there's not enough Dagmar in it.
It's unfortunate because I feel like there's just enough of her in this movie. She comes in and she does what she needs to do. The ending scene, which is kind of weird.
Of her in this
Look,
movie.
I know what you're getting at, and
just
saying. Me after class. No, Big Swifty also says this one may be tied with $5
Nice.
from August Moon for the most zooms in Italian film history.
That's actually great.
Oh man.
But yeah, to Ace, like what AC was saying, a lot of that was literally budget constraints. Like Bava always has a beautiful way of like making the most out of something very small, and that shows in this. Like, there's a reason this movie, I think it holds like a 6.5 or something out of 10 in the IMDb world of rating or whatever. So like, even though all the stuff happened in this movie and he sandwiched a character into this movie and all this stuff, it's still a great movie. Like, it's still shot beautifully.
I mean, someone's going to be really mad at me for this, but I'm going to say this is like the Giallo, the Jaws of Giallo, the Giallo Jaws, because you talk about all the problems they had with the shark in that movie, leading to, well, we want to have a movie where we have the shark attacking people, but we can't show it because it's broken half the time. Leads to one of the biggest masterpieces ever 5 years after this. And I feel like whatever constraints, whatever drama were put on this movie, it made for ultimately a better film.
It was worth it, right? Yeah. And to Big Swifty's point, yes, like even in Mario Bava circles, like this movie is probably one of the least discussed films of his, filmography. So,
and I was inspired. I haven't done it yet, but and probably someone out there has done it because it's the internet. But I want to do a bit of 8-bit artwork, like a portrait, and just call it Super Mario Bava. That's how I feel about this guy. Yeah, I just dropped my phone, so my notes are on the floor. Anyway, any kind of closing thoughts on this wonderful film, The Hatchet for the Honeymoon? Terrible title. It sounds wackier than it is. This movie deserves a dramatic, artsy title, but we have what we have. Sorry.
I mean, this was. I'm glad. Thank you, Brian, for all the background information on this one, because 1970 was a busier year than usual for Bava. Like, this was 3 films of his came out in 1970, and that's not normally the pace at which he was operating. So now that makes a little more sense, because this came out the same year as $5 for an August Moon,
right?
And his Western Roy Colt and Winchester Jack. So yeah, it's, I'm glad to have that context. I still think it's an interesting movie, and I like the stuff. The fact that he came up with different, did he do the rewrites, or was that one of the other screenwriters?
He was involved in the rewrites. So when you look at the credits,
since he's trying to sandwich it in,
right. So yeah, I would say it's a movie of his that still speaks to the greatness of his filmmaking, of his storytelling. Especially given the fact that, like, decades later, there's movies that were made that like severely mimic some of the stuff going on in this movie, and before this movie, it's never been made. It's never been done. So this, to me, speaks to that seed planting of what later would become, amazing movies like a Maniac or American Psycho. And do we have the catalog to go back and be like, yes, this is why Mary Harron did this movie or whatever, right? We don't. But I think all of us as creatives can understand that you put something out there in the air, somebody's going to catch it and it's going to be made, right? Like, I think this movie truly speaks to that. I would say, along with John, it's a top 10er for me in terms of Mario Bava films. I think that there are other Mario Bava films that I like way more than this movie, but when I watch this movie, it just incrementally gets better and better whenever I see it. Again, Femi Benusi can do no wrong. So this would be a great, like, if you're watching this movie, watch Strip Nude for Your Killer. And I think that would be a nice little, 2-4 double feature Giallo night.
And then go back and watch our podcasts about both of those films, one of which is happening right now. John Gitley, final thoughts.
To help you sleep better, Ian, the English translation of the Italian title is The Red Sign of Madness.
Ooh.
So that's better than your, yeah. And also don't forget that it could have, I have no record of this, so this is just a guess, but the beginning of George Romero's Martin is very similar, taking place on a train with a killer or a murder. But yeah, it definitely needs to be seen if you're an Italian fan, especially a Bava fan.
Yep.
You have to knock it off. You have to knock them all off the list.
Yeah,
knock it off, John.
There's not a bad Bava movie.
No, is there, like
that bikini one?
Oh, come on. I love that one. You have to be 4 years old, but Dr. Goldfoot and the Bikini Machine. It's great.
Sounds like a terrible band from the 70s.
Or the best thing that Vincent Price ever did. I'm joking. It's not the best thing Vincent Price ever did.
Dr. Goldfoot and the Girl Bombs.
That's the one, right? Bikini Machine's actually Well, they're both fun. So there you go.
Like I think the point is you get something out of every single Mario Bava movie ever made. Like he's like I was watching some show, I forgot what it was. For the context of what I'm about to say, I wish I remembered. But one of the hosts or whatever, one of the hosts said that Planet of the Vampires is a great film to just put on in the background if you're having a party or whatever. You don't necessarily have to have the sound on for everything that happens in that movie. It's beautifully, like, it's beautiful to look at. It's so interesting, striking. And I think every single Mario Bava movies has that, but in different ways. Like there's so many different, like even all the way to Shock. Like when you watch that movie, it's like, wow, he was like still inventing in this movie, you know? So that like his, from beginning of his film career all the way on, like he's just working on another level that nobody will ever catch. So I God bless Mario Bava. He's one of the greatest to ever do it, and I'm glad that we got to discuss one of his films today.
I am too. My last thought is we didn't really talk about the boy version of John in this movie, who keeps showing up he kind of has visions of his mother dying and then visions of himself as almost a separate character outside of himself, whom the final shot of the film,
I was going to say, like,
it's not that well put together, but I feel like we're meant to believe that adult John, as he's freaking out because he realizes he's about to be locked up with his dead wife's ghost, he looks out the window of the paddy wagon, and then we cut to a scene of the young boy ghost memory John kind of standing on a bridge, zooming in on his face, looking sad. I feel like there should have been sort of a matching shot to show like the paddy wagon driving past the bridge, because I had to rewind it. I'm like, what is going on here? But it's like, yeah, there's that version of him that is now at peace because he remembers what had happened during his childhood, but also he's sad because the real version of him is, you know, essentially consigned to hell. But also there's so much great dialogue in this movie. Again, my phone fell on the floor and is out of reach, but I will say,
go get it.
John,
no, wait.
John says something about marriage. I think it's one of his monologues. He's like, a woman's purpose is to make it to her wedding night, love once, and then die.
Yeah.
That is the
they
don't write him like that anymore.
That's his MO. Like, you got to let him get to their wedding night. It's like, when he kills that girl after she announces she's engaged, I'm like, okay, if you're just throwing it out, you had a perfectly solid MO and you're ruining it.
Again, I think
he's so stable and consistent the rest of the picture too.
Like, I think there's an original story that exists of this film that is meant to be that way, where like that's his MO, that's what he does. But you know,
but this is what we got.
That's what we got.
All right. Well, I got to get out of here. But I do appreciate everybody hanging out, especially the later time. We'll be back in what? Hold on. What are you doing?
2 seconds. 2 seconds, because I kind of wanted to.
You're using your 2 seconds now.
Right. Okay. Hold on.
Do your wrap up, Ian.
I'm doing it. All right. But yeah, we're going to be back in April. I've got an idea for.
I just wanted to mention that, like, I'm about to shoot something. I'm about to shoot something after.
Oh my! What?
After this episode.
So Ian.
Nice. I see what you're doing there, sir. This is very exciting. Does it have something to do with your T-shirt?
Kinda, yeah. So March will be the first official episode coming back. So
congratulations.
The Room shall return. Just like James, bloody black glove James Bond. I love it. But anyway, we'll be back in April. I've got an idea for a movie that we've talked about briefly on this show, which I'm going to run this by the panel to see if they'll let me do it, but it'll be April themed. That's what I'll say.
Okay.
And this has been Accademia Giallo for Hatchet for the Honeymoon. Thank you everyone for hanging out, spending the hour with us. I'm Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have John Kitley of Kitley's Crypt. Aaron Christensen of Horror 101 with Dr. AC, and Brian Martinez of the Giallo Room, which is coming back in March, we come to understand. So yes, thank you everybody out there. Thank you for those who hung out with us live and watching us on the replay and the audio podcast and all that stuff. If you like this show, please like and subscribe and support all of our fearsome faculty whose information is down below. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much. Take care, and class dismissed.